So nice to see you again. So what's happening next? Are we...
Maybe let's...
getting started?
Yes, maybe let's talk about how plants and fungi can teach us how to reach these goals, how to step out from these death traps we have been described by Bio, and how to deal with mourning of the civilization that we are going to lose, how to deal with these strong feelings, strong situations. Is there anything that the plants or fungi can teach us, or maybe we are on the wrong path altogether?
Do you want to start?
Yeah,
please.
Whichever way. Okay.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think I'm still digesting the last two talks. I somehow, resonated with them in different ways, and there is a common thread from the morning until the very last one, which has to do with this idea of breaking out of the pheromone trail, breaking out of the loop, right?
Yeah.
One thing is that, I have the feeling that at least in Bayo's approach, that in a sense, there is nothing much we can do about it. So the breaking out will happen, if it does happen, just because something else will, some outer power, energy, whatever, will bump you, and then you break out of the loop, something like that, right? And I keep thinking that from the inside out, that's the breaking out, the finding, out of the flattening and into the creases. I guess that's something that we should or could hopefully think that we can help ourselves to education, as we mentioned before, right? The idea of education. Now, how good plans come into the picture here? So I think one issue that really worries me, at least in education, more institutionally speaking, in academia, has to do with fastness. How fast we move, how rushed we are. Maybe those of you who are doing master's or PhD thesis, you might be familiar with the publish and perish approach, right? The culture of publish and perish. Now it's even worse because it's publish, then perish. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you publish, you will perish, regardless of how many papers you manage to get out there, right? So it looks like this idea of this, the hamster in the dopamine loop, or this all these metaphors of how we are, beheaded chickens running around, and we are not actually controlling the trajectory of how we move around our intellectual environment. I think I found at least a way, going back to Darwin. If you think of the way, when I was showing you videos of time-lapse footage of plants behaving, we were able to appreciate plant behavior. Why? Because we sped them up, right? But think one thing that, to me, the author, the thinker who got closer, way closer than nowadays, any of us, 2023, was Darwin. And Darwin couldn't do time-lapse. So it's not about the technological means. It's not about, hey, oh, great, we have all these gadgets, all these toys nowadays. Okay, you just set it up, the cam, go for the weekend, and come back on Monday and watch what the plant is doing. Oh, great. We will miss it. So even if you are watching something, you miss it. So what can we learn from the plant directly, right? So to me, actually, I tell my students, even if you time-lapse plant behavior, you should as well try to observe plant behavior to the naked eye. That gets you out of the loop. because you are not comfy sitting back, oh, let's watch what the plant did. No, you've got to slow down yourself rather than speed them up. And to me, that's one of the entry points. Like, what do you still miss by watching plants under time-lapse footage? You are still missing something that is critical, which is the time scale in which the behavior itself unfolds. So plants are not rushing, and we can see them as if they were doing what you see on the footage. Think that even some of the footage I show you is like one picture every minute, okay? So we are assembling 24 frames per second, one picture every minute. Think about it. So what you get to see. So we get the illusion that we are seeing a lot, right? That we can see a lot. But in the end, it's not true. We are missing 59 frames out of 60 by taking one picture every minute. So we think we see behavior, we're seeing it, and we are missing 99% of plant behavior, even through time-lapse footage. But that's not the most important thing to me, educationally speaking, because education is not about the details. We were speaking before about, descriptive understanding of taxonomic understanding of plants. We classify them, we put them names, we do all these things to plants. But we're still missing something, which is to watch them to their own speed. And that requires that you do some type of mental effort. It requires mental gymnastics. So I need to slow down if I want to follow them, right? So I need to understand that their behavior is the one it is, not the high-speed version I make as an artifact with time-lapse photography. So one thing I would tell, I would invite people to do is like, hey, pick a plant, okay? And then what do you get to see by slowing yourself down? So that's an example of how we can learn from plants, because we chill out, we slow down, we relax, and we get out of this hectic pace in which we are living, rushing to get stuff out, right? So that would be, to me, an entry point.
We thought about education, and for me, the entry point, similar to what you're telling about the time, about the speed. When thinking of plants and fungi, there is one thing that's for me very similar to them among these groups. It's the thing that they are modular organisms. We as humans, as mammals, we are not modular organisms. So, I mean, you have body and you have individual, and I am my individual. It's very clear. I end here and you start there. If I would be a strawberry plant, then actually I might be your part of you, just the connection is severed. So how do we find that out? Are we one or two? Or if I would be a fungus, we might both be two parts of the same fungal mycelium. So it's the question of the individual, or between the individuality and the communality. Something that Vaim was telling in the last talk. To which degree we are stuck with the problem of everything being very individual. So maybe that's one thing through education we could address, how to change our mental dance a little bit and start thinking between moving from the definition of individual as we have as the mammals into the definition of individuals as the plants have. It's easy to observe, starting from stuff like strawberry plants, or imagine how the fungal individual would feel. So if I would be a fungal spore and I'm landing here, and then I start growing, which way I start growing? This way? No, I'm actually starting growing all ways, and I'm exploring. And then I might meet another fungus. And this another fungus actually could be myself. Yes. And then there comes a chewing organism and eats part of me away. But another part of me keeps going. And the third part of me maybe feels like it starts to propagate. So it's making the backup stuff, the spores, which help me to survive. But this first part of me still keeps going and meets another organism. it can again be me, myself, my same genetic individual. So how does this picture change the way how I'm thinking
or a nice
about...
ant to zombie.
Yes.
An ant motorbike.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is a very intriguing idea to redefine education with the help of blurring the border of me and not me, of pupil and non-pupil, of classmate and myself. Only thing, of course, and that would be a nice idea too, as well, I think, to just get rid of the grades, marks.
Well, okay, so let's pick it from there. Not the grading system as such, but so one thing that I have the feeling that we are not quite getting is I think we have a distorted understanding of the scientific method. What is it that we are doing when we are doing science or following the scientific method? And that translates into how we grade, how we mark, how we value what the students are coming up with. Because many of you, here I need to remove my glasses, here I need to put them on. So many of you are blurred. now many of you, again going back to younger people, might come from a different tradition. And sometimes there is these dichotomies that you are mentioning, pupil, non-pupil, arts and sciences, or arts and humanities and sciences, these sort of things. And many of you might have a different background or a background more into the humanities or the arts. How do you get to speak the same language and grade and mark and evaluate and assess the added value of a set of ideas coming from heterodoxy, right? So to me, that's a real issue, because I think if we are going to rethink the educational system, root and branch, as I think is very much needed, we need to incorporate the role that imagination has to play within the actual following of the scientific method. It feels nowadays, the way we are doing science, it feels to me like it's like once you have a working hypothesis, you can do what we did before with watching the time lapse. On Friday I set the camera, I go for the weekend, and on Monday morning I will watch the video. Something similar happens with the scientific method. We have the cartoon understanding of doing science, like, once I have the questions, the empirical hypothesis on the table, on the bench, I can just automate the testing of the hypothesis, right? So if I have machines, robots, a good algorithm, I can just press the button and go for the weekend. And on Monday, I come to the lab and gather the data and read. I don't even need to interpret it. The algorithm does it for me. So that's a very distorted understanding of what science is about. And again, going back to Darwin, the role, the inherent, intrinsic role that imagination plays in the very act of doing science that is embodied, right? So one of the examples of the things Darwin was able to see to the naked eye, he was able to see things, for example, in patterns of coevolution, right? Thinking of pollinators and flowers. He was able to see things not by sitting back away from the target and then rationalize the pattern that might be required. Say a pollinator, what sort of pollinator could fit into this type of flower, sexually speaking, right? It involved the enacting of the action, right? He had to do it. He had to pick a toothstick or something and pretend to be, so behave like the pollinator. And thinking of himself as the pollinator, he was able to envisage or to see things that he couldn't see from the dry blackboard or from the dry notebook, right? So sometimes it's the actual behaving out there, like the interacting, the moving around, the dancing, the performing. So when you are performing, you are seeing possibilities that you don't quite see otherwise. So it's the embodiment of the thinking act itself, right? So I think that we have a distorted understanding of saying, even if those of you familiar with more of the philosophy of science approach, in philosophy of science we usually speak of the context of discovery and the context of justification, right? So we say, hey, in the context of the discovery, anything goes. You can come up with your idea eating magic mushrooms, rationalizing it, daydreaming, dreaming it, whichever way, because it doesn't matter. But once the idea is there, once you have placed the idea under the form of a empirical working hypothesis that you can test, then we move from the context of discovery to the context of justification. And then you don't need to do anything else. Imagination comes out of the way. You can just, in a dry way, as dry as possible, they would invite you to do, just test it. Then this part of the automation, the algorithm, the non-human part of it comes in, right? As if we could divide those two. So again, this is a dichotomy that doesn't take place. You don't have a context in which you come up with hypotheses and then cross a border and start to justify them by testing them, as if imagination was not part and parcel of testing the hypothesis. Imagination is required whilst testing the hypothesis, because think what it takes to test a hypothesis. I have a hypothesis, okay? So just visualize it. Think we still don't know how bats navigate their surroundings. So we still don't know it, okay? Let's travel back in the past 20th century. Oh, I'm gonna come up with a crazy hypothesis, they echolocate, for example. We don't know that, right? So we have to test it, right? So you don't know if that's a good or a bad working hypothesis unless you have discarded alternative hypotheses. So once you've discarded the rest, oh, this other hypothesis wouldn't work. Oh, this other hypothesis wouldn't work. Oh, yeah, I blindfolded them and they could still do it. Oh, that's not. Once you've discarded them all, you come up with a good inference to the best explanation. You say, hey, this is the best explanation we have as of today. But do you see? That's not something you can do without imagination. So you need to be able to see, to perceive, to envisage alternative frameworks. And once those are discarded, then you have a good explanation that might be discarded in the future. But so, imagination is part and parcel of testing hypotheses. And to me, that bears more directly when we speak of the arts. So, works of art, sometimes I think we have an understanding in which science has a role to play, and then the role of the creative arts is somehow secondary, or we don't see it on the same footing. We see it as a relation which is not truly symbiotic. Right? I say, okay, I can read the science or I can learn the science and then I can use it to inspire my work of art. As if works of art couldn't inspire science. So to me, it's truly reciprocal. And unless we close that loop, we are missing something and we are doing a distorted or a reductionist type of science. So that's what I would like to bring into the curriculum, and something that then we'll need to think how to grade it, but how that type of performative arts or whatever, that type of creative work can be brought into the lab and be part of what doing science is about, right?
I would like to add to this visual arts or performative arts also the oral arts. Stories or the narratives are also part of the generating hypotheses and testing the hypotheses. So in this way, Marilyn Sheldrake's book is, I think, a wonderful introduction into the fungal world, because he tells the stories. His narrative is so captivating that you immediately start to be really interested about what is happening next. And you learn along the way something as well. So learning when it's fun is easier than learning when it's very boring. And creating good stories might be a good part of this. And in fact, some of the stories might be wrong. So what? The trick might be to be alert and think which other stories could explain the same thing.
Yeah, but you've got to be open.
you've got to be open and you've got to tell the stories. And actually, I think all scientists are telling the stories to themselves. We just shouldn't get stuck to our favorite one. We should think that there might be a couple of other ones as well. And these storytellings, sticking to interpretations, not oversimplifying, but simplifying, of course, in order to keep a good story, is also something part of the education.
Yeah, definitely. So something interesting happened at the beginning of Bayo's talk, which is when he asked us to hug the two closest people, human beings, next to you, right? Yeah. We did some hugging at the beginning. Yeah. I don't. How much time do we have? Do we have time to show a little clip on?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't know how much this runs or. Yeah, because I was wondering, can we open the PowerPoint I had this morning, if that's possible at all? Just to show you a little clip to see what we mean by the hugging thing. Yeah.
In the meanwhile, I would point out that you were talking about arts and stories inspiring sciences. But as for me, as an artist, sciences are inspiring my artwork a lot. And I have been, since the school time, I have been very weak in mathematics. So
very weak
in mathematics, in maths. And during my past years, I have been struggling and wriggling, trying to wrap my head somehow around Gödel's theorem. And I absolutely understand nothing of it. I can't get close to it. And this is so inspiring. This has created so many of my pictures and writings. Although, of course, I'm not portraying nor Gödel nor his theorem. But sometimes, yes, these patterns of inspiration can be very, very strange.
Yeah. Can you just... Okay, so, I mean, remember what happened before when we were hugging, right? Let's put it in the context of what the science can get from the arts, okay? So that's sort of the idea. So what happens when I'm approaching a target? So I'm approaching you, what happens in your eyes? Okay, so my image is expanding in your retina, right? So something like that, right? So if you see what's happening is when you have some person moving, when they move, they are generating all that information, you see? So as it's approaching the table or the tree, those objects are getting bigger in his retina, right? And if I move away, my image in your retina is contracting, right? So something similar was happening when we were hugging, remember? But we are simply changing the type of energy flow. So that now is not optic flow. So now it's optic flow. I'm getting close to you, and then the optic flow is how that image is changing in her retina as I'm moving with respect to her. But if we are hugging, we are changing the type of flow. It's not optic flow anymore, right? It's haptic, it's the feeling of the body. So we are hugging each other. And when we were hugging each other, we were generating information. So we were generating a type of information that you couldn't generate otherwise. So when I'm feeling your body next to me and we are hugging, something is happening. I feel the pressure on my skin, and something is getting bigger, it's expanding. The more surface of body that we hug and we press against each other, our bodies, the more that is expanding. So more surface of skin is being expanded. See what I mean? So it's something similar to the optic flow, but it's a different type of flow. It's haptic flow, right? So now think what's happening here. So if you're thinking of this, if you're thinking of this, again, okay? Now we are using, this is the agent, and this is the object, the target. But now we can use this idea of the dance. We can dance and see, put ourselves in the shoes of the plant. So what would it take for a plant? What would it take for a plant to be doing what this guy is doing? Well, the plant needs to be what? Moving around and generating that type of energy flows. So what we were doing when we were hugging. So imagine I am a climbing plant, okay, and I'm revolving in circles, and here is a target. No, okay, this is the target, and I'm just growing in circles until I reach it. So what's happening here is the very same thing of what's happening to this guy when he's standing up and walking. Is generating information. Things are expanding in his retina, and now we can think of this physically. When we are hugging, we are generating information, right? So if you are, for example, in the arts, to me the thought is that this is something that you don't get to envision or to visualize this type of hypothesis unless you embody them, unless you are enacting them. So that requires that we think, for example, of a pattern of coevolution in between a flower and a pollinator as a dance. So they are dancing, but literally. So that type of dance in between pollinator and flower, a pattern of coevolution, how they are shaping each other, is another way of saying that when we are dancing, when we are hugging, when we are interacting with each other, we are generating, when we are mycorrhizal networks, and you are the mycelium, and I'm the roots of the tree, we are dancing, we are generating information in the forms of these flows. So all those flows are the one we can try to find a type of explanation that unifies them all, so that we can somehow unify the type of explanation in terms of how we deal with those energy flows, how information flows throughout the mycorrhizal network, and that's not metaphoric. That's literally the same dance that happens when you are in the performative arts and you have, or think of music, playing an instrument. So that type of activity allows you to put a different hypothesis to the test, scientifically speaking, right? So that's what I meant about how that work of art can enrichen the way we envisage the very hypothesis, right? So it's not a metaphor. By interacting, by dancing with our surroundings, we generate information that we wouldn't generate otherwise. I couldn't be sitting here and thinking, I need to move with respect to you to find the perspective, the point of contact, if you're gonna hug, how much time I have left before we do physical contact, that sort of thing. You cannot compute it, so you cannot rationalize it. You've got to, so it's part of the emotion, the feeling, the acting, right? So that, in terms of education, to me, I think it would be very important that when we think the curriculum and when we think in primary school, in secondary school, that we don't divide thinking that each different subject is a separate compartment, that when we are doing physical exercise, when we are doing dance, when we are doing theater, we should be thinking that we are doing something that comes hand in glove, that is part of the very same thing that we are doing when we are doing maths, physics, or chemistry. It's got to be part of the same effort. And we will, at least I think, we might be able that way to break out of some of that loop that we were mentioning before. That's truly enriching, I think.
Could I add something?
Of course.
Do I need a microphone or can I just say it?
Do have mine.
Imagine an education system in which touch and movement, which are our earliest developmental sensory capacities, were integrated into everything that we do, that they were there underneath. Our eyes are the last part of our, sensory capacity to develop. So actually, if that whole ground was there and it wasn't something we were fearful around or something that we restricted in some way, I think our learning process would be completely, our sense of communal, our relationship to ecosystems would be completely different.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know what you think, but it's clear. The problem is how you get to do it, right? The problem is in practice, how you get to implement it. But think of the very way we were approaching plant life by providing, taxonomies or, how many of us have, especially those of us with an age, like, nowadays maybe it's starting to be done differently if we want to be optimistic, but how many of us have been rehearsing and by heart regurgitating, memorized knowledge? And paradoxically, sometimes we've been doing that next to the thing we are memorizing. So we are memorizing the linguistic label of the name of the plant instead of walking out there and touching the plant or seeing the plant or sitting next to the plant. Come on, leave the desk, close the book and walk out there. It's there. You don't need to be seeing the picture of the plant. The plant is there. Right? You might be learning the tomato plant when the tomato plant is there. Right? So paradoxically, we don't quite get the symbolic versus the embodied understanding.
I also very much liked what you said, Peter, about the inspiration of something not understandable. It very much connects to me. I remember when I was learning for my exams at the end of the gymnasium, or maybe the entering exams of the university, and I first learned more about fungi, so what's the way how fungi operate, and I realized that these organisms are weird. They're strange. You can't put them in the box, like they don't fit into the box. And I'm afraid I'm stuck with the fungi since then. So it can be very, very, very inspiring for people to find something that doesn't fit into the categories. And that's something that for me, fungi and plants actually are perfect examples of. You just can't put them into very clear categories. They keep changing. So if you like clear categories, it makes you mad. If you like transitions or movement or dynamics, then this is exactly what you're looking for. So I was talking before about fungi being saprotrophs and symbionts and parasites, and that's sometimes oversimplifications. There are enough fungi, actually quite many fungi, which throughout their life are just navigating between these states. And now what you do with the organism like that sometimes goes and finds its own food, sometimes makes friends, let's do it together, then says, well, it's time to move on.
But because of the obsession of using labels to dichotomize, to say you are this or that, as if it was binary categories, right? It's a continuum.
It's a continuum.
And it shifts.
It's a continuum that teaches us a lot. So it teaches us also about the day and night, the circular rhythms. It teaches us about after the spring comes summer and the nature changes. So we need to eat differently. We are growing up. We need to move differently. So education again.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about this flexible, flowing nature of fungi and plants. Remember, we about 1 year ago we were talking about the sex life of fungi. That is again really, really amazing. Would you open it a bit?
Sex life of fungi is extremely illuminating because again you can't put it in a box. I've learned from my colleagues zoologists that actually among some animals there's also very interesting ways of sex life. But so fungi can have sex in many different ways. Among the fungal kingdom, the sex has many different shapes. And if we take my friends arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, then to our knowledge, they just don't have it. Extremely boring. Whilst they don't think it's boring for them, they have other ways to find out how to generate the diversity in genetics and the diversity of ways how to respond to the environment. We can then take something like our edible mushrooms, some chanterelle or bolete or something like that. I think these species have hundreds of sexes. So we humans have two, and I'm one, you are another. There's no other ways. So the female and male, they match together, whether the individuals match together is another story. But physiologically, they match together. In terms of these hundreds of sexes of the basidiomycetes, not all these hundreds match together with each other. So as I was trying to, perform a fungal individual before, so I'm here and I'm meeting another fungal individual, and now I'm starting talking, dancing. Are you the one which matches with me, or are you the another 50 or 70 or 200 which do not match with me? Can we have sex or not? That's what happens. And this is what's normal for fungi. They don't have due bodily forms of the sexes, but they check the genetic configuration of which one they are.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't know what you think, but how much of this short-sightedness that we suffer from has to do with the propositional language, with the format of our thought, with thinking with words. So is it, I keep thinking, are we missing all this continuum, all this richness, and we put it into these polarized binary categories because of being language users, because of thinking with words? Or even if we were able not to think with words, are we enslaved in some dynamics into thinking in binary terms? Because we are all falling prey of this black or red, or black, white or black, this or that, left or right. So is it the result of language? I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really know what you think about that, but is language itself the fault, or is just a symptom? I don't know. Does it make sense, the question? Do you have the same problem I have?
Maybe some people don't think in the words. Maybe there are people who actually think in the images or sounds.
So in those cases, those of you who are not using a linguistic format, do you still fall prey of binary categorizations, or are you able to go beyond those? That's a good way to know whether the language was the problem.
Maybe I will hand over the microphone to the audience. Someone? You want?
Hello. I just wanted to say that it's not like, actually your question is binary already. Do you think in words or do you think in pictures? And I wanted to say, like I get pictures, but I also get words and probably other things. So it's not one or another. So anyone else?
In the meantime, I can say that plenty of my memories are actually sensorial. I mean, I memorize an image or an event, but the first thing that comes is a smell, for example, or a light.
I personally don't think that it is language problem.
Okay.
I think that many problems are caused also by education. And that we teach us. We were also taught there is some right answers. And I think when the education shifts toward that there could be many answers. So I think it's more about thinking and more about how we let people to change their views, to have many answers, and to let in this uncertainty that we exactly don't know, that there is no one answer.
Yeah. Also, that's a great point, because one thing, another problem that I think we have here is why. So again, breaking out of the pheromone trail, right? Part of it, I think, has to do with regardless of the format. I agree. Could be linguistic, non-linguistic, could be plural, multi, whatever. But one thing has to do with why are we not allowing other answers? Because of the way education works, I think the worst thing we can do with young generations is to make them believe that we already know the answers, and that's dogma. Yeah. So we are telling them in the textbooks how things work, instead of trying to push them into questioning how things work. So we already think, oh, you go through, we've gathered so much knowledge, we've accumulated so much knowledge in the last half a century or century and a half, whatever, that, oh, you need to go through all these textbooks until you are 20-something, and then you don't need to question that because that's already established. And by the time you are doing a master thesis or a PhD, am I supposed now to think different? Am I supposed now to think out of the box? Oh, it's far too late. You need to be questioning that when you are in kindergarten.
Sure.
And that's probably one of the problems, that we are speaking in terms of the answers. If you are giving me the answer to something that is set in stone, then what's the point of memorizing that answer? The more important point is to think, hey, what is it that we still don't know, or what could be looking from a different angle? How can we change the very question we are raising, regardless of the number of answers we have? Because you may have answer A, B, and C, but maybe it was the wrong question. So you change the question and then you trash all A, B, and C answers. So that's certainly, and that way, by the way, at least I see it with my children, that I wish, I don't see that I suffer from seeing how the education they've received, right? But it's kind of, you think there is nothing you can do about it unless you go back to those early stages and rethink it from the very beginning, right? And that cuts across science and the arts, by the way. Because we might think that we are being more creative in the arts, and we might be rehearsing again things, in a very critical way. So, but here I think that we have in sciences more room to learn from the arts. That's for sure. That's one positive interaction. Maybe we can learn a bit more from the arts in getting out of the established or the received view. That maybe.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you for the note on questions. I'm also myself working in education. We have a whole chapter in our handbook about why questions are important, and a good question teaches more than a good answer. But yeah, just to reflect that, I also think that language can be an issue because it frames our thinking. But maybe to ironically introduce another binary concept, I've just started thinking about how you talked about the non-understandable, and we think about scientific curiosity. And as I've understood, curiosity, the other side of curiosity is fear. It's how we approach the unknown or the non-understandable. I think when we think about the whole Anthropocene and how humanity behaves, it often is because it's something that we don't know and we fear it, and therefore we want to control it. So I'm just curious about your thoughts. Is it something that you agree that we tend to, instead of being curious about what we don't know, we tend to fear it and control it? And then coming to the education, how could we turn this fear into curiosity?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's always safer to have one story rather than many alternative ones, which are kind of jumping in between which one is on the top and which one is behind the scenes. I really think that observation is something that's maybe really valuable to teach and perhaps value. I think kids are rather curious and observant, and they like to play around and test. I mean, these can be very scientific tests. So they do things, they have an idea, they test, let's see what happens if I do this way. And they keep repeating, let's see what happens if I do that way. So in a way, it's a very scientific approach to the environment. And this is the way they learn. Somehow in the education, we're weeding this out. We are putting things into categories and suppressing the wrong answers and suppressing the observation. So you told about Darwin before. I think Darwin started observing how soil forms. So he noted that actually soil grows kind of, 1 centimeter per year or something.
Yeah.
How do you need to observe? What do you need to observe to notice a thing like that? And he did. So a good observation and good storytelling with the ability to change the stories, to keep changing the stories along the way is how I feel about it.
Yeah, before the next question, may I add something to what she said? Because I think it's really interesting. So how we transform fear into something positive and something that doesn't block us, so that we don't get like blocked by, oh, what can I say, right? I think there is a powerful tool here, which is something that Sidney Brenner, the Nobel Prize in biology, he coined a couple of decades ago. It comes by the name of the power of ignorance. Ignorance is what blocks you, is what makes you feel fear. Oh, what am I to contribute if I'm an ignorant? I'll just shut up and go to the last row, right? And stay quiet because I'm an ignorant. Now, he transformed this idea into the power of ignorance. And he tells a beautiful story. He has a book called My Life in Science, right? And he tells the story of how he was in the 70s. Sidney Brenner was, like, after Watson and Crick, he was the next generation at Cavendish Lab in Cambridge. So it was like the birth of molecular biology as we know it today, right? And then they were hanging out all these molecular biologists. So the experts in those days, there were few, right? So picture 20 people gathering, brainstorming at Cavendish Lab, right, in the 70s. And they were stuck with this problem, truly stuck. Oh, can't make progress. What do we do here? And there was this, at the time, the Soviet Union visiting scholar, but he wasn't a biologist. This guy was a computer scientist, I seem to recall. But whatever, but he was ignorant, right? And precisely because he was ignorant and didn't fear, he was able to say, hey, how about, you're stuck, oh, what do we do, all biology. And then he goes, how about, and he provided a way to frame the problem that nobody would have dared to raise because he could have been stupid. But because he was an outsider, he was able to raise it in a very naive way. It was like transforming a biological problem into a syntactic problem. That for him, with a computer science mentality, was crystal clear. Oh, why don't you? And that why don't you, coming from an outsider, became the way out of the problem. But the thing here is that those that were the experts were not able to raise the very question because they were far too close, they were far too experts. And the guy that was not the expert was the one that was able to let it flow naturally because he was not committed to any dogmatic view that wouldn't allow this idea to raise in the first place. So maybe the way to go from fear into curiosity is to use the power of ignorance.
Well, I now feel I have almost nothing to say after that, but I just recall this question that you asked about binarity. That, it seems to me that this binary way of thinking, it really is not a problem. But the problem is that people have some kind of a very strong urge of repetition. That's what already psychoanalysts discovered. Freud called it Wiederholungszwang, this compulsion to repeat, that he also connected to the death drive. So this death spiral of the ants is very similar to this compulsion of repetition. And I think if it comes to education and all the problems of today, then what makes people to repeat and repeat the same stupidities all the time is, now I would like to defend negativity instead of positivity, because this society and civilization of positivity where we live in, it constantly urges us to action. We have to do something. Paco Calvo Maarja also told about this, that there is this constant constant whip lashing behind us and urging us to move on and to make progress, and you must do something, you must say something, and you must reach into something positive and say something positive and look positive and so on. But that means that people get tired. They are really exhausted, and so if you are exhausted and you are constantly urged to do something, say something, you start doing the same things and repeating the same things that have already been said, and your mind never freely wanders. So I think what we need is sort of negativity and naivety, of course, and well, maybe also sometimes it's good to be a little bit afraid of something and just go away and relax and just even be a little bit or even very lazy sometimes. And then I think this compulsion of repetition might somehow also be released, and you drift away and drop out, like Timothy Leary said. And then I think it will be possible to break out from this deadly spiral or circle of repetition.
I don't think there is a better answer to your question than to remain silent, right? What can I say after this, right? I'd better shut up. No, I see your point, of course. Yeah.
I was recently in an event where a drummer taught us how to do the drumming, and his main point was that the rhythm is made of pauses between the beats. I think what we can learn from plants and fungi is that there are pauses or empty spaces in between stuff where you can start wandering and reaching out for what you don't know and maybe what you're afraid of, but to find a new way.
Even behavior, I mean, if you think of plant and fungi behavior, we are used to thinking of behavior as we visualize animal behavior as if you've got to be doing something. But inhibiting acting, non-acting is behaving. So I'm not just behaving when I cross the traffic lights. I'm behaving when I'm standing without crossing them, right? And sometimes in plants, we have the obsession with trying to anthropomorphize them. Oh, the plant has got to be doing something fancy, something exciting for me to appreciate their behavior, right? We should appreciate their behavior when they are doing nothing, because not doing anything is behaving, is being standing up at the traffic lights without crossing, right? So that's, yeah, definitely.
I love this idea of pauses, of gaps, and also the idea of changes, because to my mind, we're living in the book of changes, and therefore, I would propose to make a change now, to change our meeting from this sitting here of having a stage and the audience,
and have some coffee,
and move into an open space where we can freely talk to each other, have coffee, tea, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the sunset, although there is plenty of time until the sunset, but we have nowhere to hurry, and just continue the talking in this way, because to my mind, that's what the conferences are good for, because in the course of this kind of communication, we have chance to exchange ideas, create new ones, to get acquainted with each other and make friends. And here I see comes a last comment.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is also with regard to this education and reducing short-sightedness. There were many very nice points made about how to do it, but I'm a bit concerned that maybe one of the fundamental problems was not still addressed enough, namely that the most problems that humans have are with complex systems that contain very many components that have endless interactions, and our brains are not just very capable of understanding the causes and effects there. So all these suggestions do not seem to really address or solve the problem about how humans actually can understand things at the level of complexity of ecosystems, or even smaller, I don't know, root systems were already so complex that you said that you cannot really study them in the wild. So I'm wondering, do you see any way forward with educating people to better understand how complex systems work, how the cause and effect works in complex systems, how the phenomena emerge, and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I mean, being in the sciences, because I'm in a philosophy department, and one of the things I always think is that the philosophy of science should be taught in physics, chemistry, biology, in all these faculties, and it's not being taught. And when it's being taught, it's being done the wrong way. And by this I mean that one way out, I am entirely with you here, I can hear what you say. So one way out, for example, take psychology, okay? The discipline, the faculty of psychology, what people go through in orthodox textbook of cognitive psychology. They don't get exposed to, for example, approaches to cognitive phenomena under dynamical systems theory, complex theory, complex dynamics. They think that by default, whatever the mind does is kind of, like the software running on my neural hardware, and then we have this digital metaphor, the digital computer metaphor, and then you think that there is something which is called a representation and computations, and we follow a recipe book, we follow rules, and that's the type of dogma that students walk through their undergrad education, and they don't get to think that, hey, hold on a sec, the mind cannot be just this, rule follower device that can be taken like a step at a time, as if vision was about snapshots. It's not about the snapshot, it's way more complex. You need, for example, to see how it unfolds in time. It's not something that I receive a picture, I process it in my brain, I do something about it at the next time step. No, it's a continuous, temporally unfolding process. So in terms of, if you spoke of metaphysics, in philosophy we say you're not committed to a metaphysic of particles, but to a metaphysic of processes that unfold in time, and you cannot press pause. If you press pause, you miss the phenomenon. It's a dynamic thing. So you could speak in terms of if you go into the way you would do through education is, well, we would need to revise the curriculum and say, you cannot study psychology and just go through cognitive-based psychology. You need to understand other types of psychology along the lines of a dynamical understanding with when you speak of, not of a representation being in my head, but of the way a complex system stabilizes in an attractor. A basing of attraction, that's what we call, hey, that's what the guy has when he's entertaining concept A, is in this attractor. If we understand it in dynamical terms, and it's a process that unfolds naturally in time, and you cannot stop it and take a snapshot and understand it, it would be meaningless, then we would be trying to rephrase the problem through a different lens. But we don't do that. You would need to change the curriculum.
Yeah. In one way, I agree, but at the same time, actually, the computational thinking, for me, actually the computational simulations of complex systems have been the best way to understand how actually...
Oh, absolutely. So no, one thing is modeling. Oh, I would agree entirely. So the modeling itself, so say I want to forecast when the next hurricane is going to hit the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, modeling is the best tool we have. So one thing is to resort to modeling as a tool with predictive power, and a different thing is to think of a cognitive system as a dynamical system itself, regardless of the modeling. But of course, as a modeling tool, we don't have a better tool. I can hear you.
Thanks. So there is one more request for the microphone.
Maybe I would add something to just finish the...
Ma püstitan selle küsimuse mõlemas keeles.
Hold on a sec.
Aga ma päris õnnelik oleksin, et kui Maarja ja Peeter vastaksid meie kaunis keeles, sest nagu ma kahtlustan, et siis vastus minu küsimusele võib sõltuda keelest. Ma püstitan kõigepealt eesti keeles selle küsimuse, et kui meelevaldne saab olla inimõuse mõiste vastandatuna loomsusele eluteadustes ja vaimuteadustes, kas see meelevalla ulatus erineb? Ma nagu siis üritan ka Paula jaoks sõnastada. How arbitrary in what the scope can arbitrage the concept of humanness as opposed to animalness in spirit sciences and in life sciences as opposed to the spirit science alias humanity. Et kui oleks võimalik nagu eesti keele valdajatel vastata eesti keeles, siis teised võib-olla inglise, prantsuse või hispaania keeles. Merci, ma tean.
So?
But that was Estonian, right?
First part was in Estonian and the second part was in English.
But then the English went back into Estonian.
Yes.
It's the same question, so still
but still it was the same question. How it was quite complicated one. How can we distinguish the concept of humanness in life sciences and
social sciences?
Yes, social sciences.
Humanness and animalness.
Yes.
Right. You want me to go? Well, I don't think we should distinguish them. I don't know if I understood the question correctly, but why should we distinguish them? We are animals. I would like to think that the understanding of human behavior follows the same principles as the understanding of any other form of behavior of any other biological organism. So one thing to me, one of the reasons why to me working with plants is helpful is because that allows us to stop being so arrogant and think that we are special in some sense. So we are not that special. We are just one more form of life. If there is a tool, say ethology, if I can walk out there and follow some form of life and try to make sense of the way they are, making sense of their surroundings, that's the very same tool I should be applying in the case of humans. So I in principle, I don't treat humans differently from the way I treat other animals in my scientific approach towards them. Another way to put it is that I think that methodologically speaking, it's wise to follow a bottom-up approach and not the top-down approach. Because the top-down approach is risky on two accounts. If we think of ourselves as special because we regard ourselves as rational animals, then we try to use that rational animal understanding of ourselves as the gold standard against which we compare other forms of life. And then we say, oh, primates, chimps, monkeys, mammals, birds are smart, are intelligent insofar as they approach my gold standard, myself, to some extent. And that, I think that does a disfavor. Because for one thing, if we are truly following this on natural grounds, think that what might happen, say because we didn't stop evolution keeps going, right? So say in 1 million years' time, we come across this other species. We may have gone extinct, pretty, highly likely. And then there is this other species on planet Earth, and they have whatever neural makeup they have. They are really smart, and they have a lot of hemispheres, a lot of things going on. And they say, wow, look at this, the fossil record. These guys, Homo sapiens, they couldn't be smart, these guys. They only had 2 hemispheres, for God's sake, just 2 hemispheres. And one corpus callosum. I mean, one corpus callosum, that's like a single track road connecting them. For God's sake, we have this and that. So it's so dangerous to use yourself as the metric, as the gold standard against which to compare other forms of intelligence. So I would get started from the bottom up and use the same methodologies and toolkits for the study of any form of life whatsoever. And just posit as many theoretical constructs are needed along the way, as I need to make use of them when the need arises. But before getting to the rational part of humans, I would need to understand the subcortical and the emotional part of humans, which connects us all way closer than that little thing on top, that we just think of us as if we were prefrontal cortex. We are way more things than just prefrontal cortex, right? So to me, let's get started more homogeneously from the bottom up.
Right. And as there was a request of answering this question also in Estonian, would you, Maarja, like to?
No ma proovin siis, ma jagan seda vaadet, et ma ka ei teeks väga palju vahet, ei eristaksin loodusteaduslikku, sotsiaalteaduslikku mõtlemist inimeste ja loomade vahel, et jah, paljude loodusteaduste jaoks inimene on ka üks loomadest ja looduse osa, et siin võib olla küllalt kunstlik see viis eristada, kuidas sa seda defineerisid inimeseks ja loomaks olemist. Teine asjaolu, mida Paco hästi välja tõi ja mida ma tegelikult eelmise küsimuse vastuseks oleks ka tahtnud rõhutada, vaadatagi protsesse alt üles lihtsamast keerukamale või ülevalt alla keerukamalt lihtsamale, et see aitab meil mõista nii loomi kui teisi organisme ja tingimata bakteri ei ole väga palju eristuv võib-olla inimesest oma võimekuselt lahendada keerulisi olukordi, kui see vastab su küsimusele.
Et kas on pakkumata kaudu vaatlemine või võrdlemine asendada toimuste ehk protsesside silmas pidamisega. Ma veel lisaks, nagu minu teada saksa keeles on võimalik öelda Tierkeit und Menschkeit, espanjoolis siis animalidad versus humanidad. Ma tõesti nagu kahtlustan, et erinevates keeltes kirjutatud ja öeldud tekstides ei klapi, näiteks eesti keeles on ju võimalik eritella inimlust, inimsust ja inimlikkust. Inimesed, kes inglise keelt korralikult oskavad, võivad ka inglise keeles seda väljendada. Aga no ma pakun välja, et võib-olla siis järgmisel aastal jätkata selle targutõusliku või selle üle kui meelevaldne või kui targutõuslik või kui sisukas see eritõus võiks olla. Aga muidugi Peeter ka võiks kunagi kirjutada või et ma tänan, merci.